All right, we'll be starting the workshop now. Thank you everyone who is here. So my name is Brenda Monivon. I am an academic facilitator here at TRIO. I am a reading and writing tutor for both sides. I'm for the Student Support Services program side and the Student Support Services veteran side. All right, I'm gonna let my colleague introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Vincent. I'm a community builder here for the SSSV, and my major is history. So I'm going to give it back to Brenda so she could get us started.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to be going over just the formatting basics of MLA APA in Chicago. You guys might already be familiar with these, so hopefully you can always use this slide as a resource in the future. All right, next slide, please. So the first one we're going to be going over is the Modern Language Association, or also known as MLA 9th edition format. So just the general guidelines for MLA formatting, but before I get into them, I just want to make a disclaimer that please always make sure to follow your instructor's guidelines. So always looking at their syllabus, always looking at the assignment details to make sure that one, the formatting is actually MLA, or two, maybe the professor has added their own like additional details to the formatting. So just making sure you don't glance over any small details that you might miss. All right, so now some of the general guidelines for MLA is that the paper should follow an 8.1 inch by 11 inch paper, double spaced using 12 point font, using 12 point times New Roman font. Oh my gosh, sorry, I keep tripping over my words. And then leave only one space after punctuations with the margin of 1 inch on all sides. So if you guys are using Google Docs, or most common one is Microsoft Word Docs, you don't have to worry about making sure that the inches and the measurements are right. So making sure you have an 8.1 inch by 11 inch paper, because this is all defaulted on Google Docs and Microsoft Word Docs. All right. And then the first page of an MLA style paper should have the following. It should have your name, instructor's name, course title, and date in the upper left-hand corner. And then center on the paper title and center on the page is the paper title, which should be following standard caps. So no underlining, italics, quotes, or bolding. It should just be in standard caps, regular 12-point font, 12-point times New Roman font. And then at the top right upper corner, you're going to create a header that has your last name followed by the page number. And I'm going to go into a visual aid just so you guys can have an example as well. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this is an example of one of my papers. As you can see, I already kind of titled the components. So I have my name, and then underneath it is my professor's name, but followed by the course title and then the date in the left-hand corner. And then if you go to the upper right-hand corner in the header, I have my last name with the page number next to it. And then as you can see, my paper title is centered on the page and just standard caps and then regular 12-point font, 12-point times New Roman font. I don't know why I keep saying 12-point font. And then I also want to add like the half-inch indentation detail just in case someone isn't familiar with how to make sure that their indentation is at the half mark inch. Well, you can always click at the very top, like where the ruler is. You could click the top one to see where your indentation is lying. And also this function is on Word Docs as well if you don't use Google Docs. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. And then now going into the works cited, so I feel like citations is probably one of the many struggles that come with MLA. It can get very confusing because there's different variations, but here on this page, I have all of the elements of a works cited entry, and then I'll be going into the different variations because maybe just depending on what source you're using, you might have to omit some components or add on to the components if it's available. All right, so just the general elements is the author, title of source, title of container, other contributors, version number, and then just the number, our volume number, publisher, publication date, location, and date of access. And then I also just want to make a note that if you're not familiar with what is title container, because you are going to be seeing this in the next couple of slides, the container is basically what is containing the information that you are specifically pointing to. So for example, the title of the source could be the chapter, and the container of that chapter is the book. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so for work citations for books, you're going to be following the main elements, author last name, followed by the first name, title, which is italicized, publisher, and year. So underneath, I have an example with just one author where I color coded it so you could compare it to the elements at the top. So I have the author's last name, then first name, and then the book title, Chaos Making a New Science, in italicized, the publisher, and then the year. And then underneath it, I have an example using multiple authors. So if you ever need to refer to that, so you're going to list the authors by the last name and then just follow the general guidelines where it's the title, italicized, publisher, and then the year. All right, thank you. Next slide. Okay, and then for book chapter, it's going to have the same concept where author, title, publisher, year. The only difference is you're going to be adding the title of the chapter along with the page numbers. So notice how the title of the chapter is in quotations, not italicized, but the book title itself is italicized. So remember, for the title of the container, we want to italicize it. But then for book chapters, it's in quotations. And then page numbers at the bottom. So another example I have underneath follows the elements that I listed at the top. And then just a note, the main reason writers will cite a chapter of a book instead of a whole book is when the chapter is written by multiple or different authors from the book editors. So let's say you have a book compiled by different editors, different authors, but you want to use only one specific chapter because it's written by one specific author. So that's when you will cite the book by the chapter. But if the book is written by one author completely, then you only have to use the book citation. You don't have to cite it by authors. You don't have to cite it by chapter specifically. All right. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then now getting into journal articles. Journals usually have volume and issue numbers, so this is going to be a difference that you'll see. And then also another difference is that you're most likely going to have a DOI link at the very end because that's probably where you got the source from, like a database, right? So the general elements is going to be authors, title of articles, title of journals, volume number, issue number, the year it was published, and then pages. And if there is a DOI link, the DOI at the end. So just kind of follow that example where the location, which is the pages or where you find a source, is always at the end of the citation. All right, so underneath I have an example where I have the author in red, and then I have the title of the article in quotations. And as you can see, the title, which is in orange, is italicized, followed by the numbers, the volume number, the year of publication, the pages, and then a DOI link. All right, next slide, please. Okay, now this is work citations for websites. Websites is where it can get really tricky because sometimes a lot of information can be omitted. For example, you can have a website and an unknown author, so you might not know where to put you might not know how to address the source. So for websites, including online newspapers and magazines, You usually don't have to include a publisher because the URL is included with it. If a web page has no publication date, add an access code or access date instead. So the general elements is going to be the editor, author, and compiler name if available, name of site, version number, name of organization, date of source created, so the year, if it's available, and then the URL or DOI link, and then date of access if available. So underneath, an example I have is using Purdue OWL, which I used a lot to make this slide or presentation. So I have the organization name because there's really no one author or editor. It's just a compilation of people working on it. So name of site, and then I have the name of the organization that I specifically addressed to, which is the Writing Lab in OWL at Purdue and Purdue U. The date of creation, I have the link, and then the date I access the link, which is March 10th. All right. Next slide, please. Okay. And just like for in-text citations, a quick summary. For MLA, it's pretty simple because it's pretty consistent across the board. You're going to be creating your in-text citations by addressing the author by their last name. So it's just going to be author's last name. If you choose to paraphrase information, you'll do parentheses, author's last name, parentheses, period. But if you have multiple sources and one paraphrase from one citations, you could separate the sources with a semicolon. So if you could see my example, I have Burke 3, semicolon, Dewey 21. That's how you'll just use two citations or reference two citations. And then if you're using a book chapter, just make sure to add the page number at the end that you're specifically referring to. And then if you're using a journal article, same thing, author's last name and then page number if the page number is available. And then for websites, it could get a little confusing just because, like as I mentioned, some information might be missing or omitted. So if you have the author's name, great, use the author's last name. If you don't have the author's name, go by the organization name. And if you have an unknown author and you don't have the organization, go by the title of the website, which is Wales likely impacted by, as you can see from my example, I just went by the title of, yeah. All right. Okay, and next slide, please. All right, so I just wanted to get into a little activity to see if you guys were able to grasp onto any information I've just said. I know it's a lot to take in, so this will also help us debrief a little bit on what we just went over. So in the chat, if you guys can please participate. In the chat, I want you to identify the citations I have listed here. So which citation is a book chapter, journal article, or a website citation? So you could just put one is, and then the citation you think it is. Okay, Cynthia said one is book, and is close, is really close. Is a book, but there's page numbers at the end. So what is that specifically telling us? Also, we have a title and quotations too. Can anyone have a thought? Okay, book chapter, yes, is a book chapter. And then does anybody know what two is? Journal, yeah. Thank you, Tiffany. It's a journal article. Thank you, Brandon. And we could tell that's a journal article because of the DOI link at the end. And then anybody have an idea of what three might be? Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Brandon. It's a book. We have the author's last name followed by the title, which is italicized. And then lastly, does anybody have a guess for the last citation? Thanks, Juan. Yes, it's a website. Good job, everyone. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to be moving on to our second format, which is American Psychological Association 7th edition, also known as APA. And if you guys are any psychology majors or maybe even forensics behavior, having to write a bunch of research paper, you might be really familiar with APA because APA format is the style of writing and citing sources that is commonly used in academic writing, research paper, and scientific journals. So as we go more in depth with APA, you will see a theme that most citation list more than one author, just because most sources that you'll be using for APA, for any APA format, will have multiple contributors. So a common one you might see is journal articles. All right, next slide, please. All right, so the general structure, the general layout of an APA format is you're going to have your title page, which includes the paper title, the author's name, which is going to be you, anyone who wrote the paper, the department and university name, followed by the course number and name, the instructor name, and then the date of the assignment or date you've written the assignment. And then after your title page, you're going to have your abstract, which is a completed summary of what is in the paper. If it is a research paper, it should have the question and hypothesis included in there. And most time, abstract are within 150 to 200 words. So it's not very long, just a quick summary. And then following your abstract is where you're going to get into your main essay or your main body paragraphs. And for every class is different, but if this is specifically a research paper, you're most likely going to have subheadings that includes the methods and the results, which will explain what happened in your research. And then at the very end, just like MLA, you're going to have a reference page. So no plagiarism. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so the general guidelines for APA formatting. And once again, before I get into the guidelines, always make sure that you're following your professor's guidelines or your professor's formatting, just in case they didn't add anything different from APA. Okay, so it's going to be double spaced on an 8.5 inch by 11 inch paper. Always have a running head or page number at the top. Always leave 1 inch margin, and there will always be a title page. And then the font is the same as MLA, where it's going to be Times New Roman 12-point font. And then for the first page of the APA style paper, you're going to have the title paper, which we just kind of briefly discussed, where it has your institution, course number, professor's name, assignment due date. Okay, and I'm going to be going into a visual aid as well to help kind of visualize all this. Right, next slide, please. Okay, so here we actually have an example from one of our community builders here at Trio. Her name is Karina, and she is an awesome writer, and she's great at APA formatting as well. So she's letting us use her example. Okay, so as you can see, Karina has her title listed and centered and is bolded as well. And then underneath the title is the author of the creation, which is her, Karina. And then below her name is the university, followed by the class, followed by professor, and then the due date at the end. And then if you can see at the top in the header, she has her title header or her running head, so money or passion. And then in the right-hand corner is the page number. And this title page is going to be a page on its own, unlike MLA, where you have the title and then you immediately follow it by your essay. For APA, this title page will be on its own. All right, next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to be handing it off to Vincent.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to be taking over and I'm going to be going over our works cited page. So just the guidelines, like once again, just like my colleague Brenda said, to be sure to always look over the different guidelines that your professor has on their prompt. So just to get the basics out, we have the authors. So this example we have here is a multiple author citation. So we see here that the names are separated by a period and a comma. And then after that, we're going to have the publication date, which is when the article is published. So you're going to put that in parentheses right after. And then following that, we're going to have the article title. And with the article title, you're only going to capitalize the first letter and the ones after a colon. And then the scientific article is going to follow that. So we see it here. It's in the green, and it's the psychological record, and each letter is capitalized before the word. And the article link is always needed, and it's at the end. And if needed, there can also be a volume number, an issue, and also a page number. So the guidelines for formatting is kind of different depending on the source that you use. So for a book citation, you're going to have the author, and then following by the year of publication, the title of work, and we see here we have the colon, and then following a subtitle, and then we have the publisher name and the DOI if it's available. And then for the journal article, the difference between these two is that we have a title chapter instead of a title of work, and we also or we have a title of work, but it's followed after the editors in the title, and then we also capitalize the letter for the subtitle. And we're going to have the pages of the chapter following the subtitle and the publisher and the DOI if it's available. And a web page is a little more complicated because you're not always going to have the necessary information. So if you do have the author, you're going to put the last name, and then you're going to have their first initials, and then you're going to have the year, month, and date in parentheses, and then you're going to follow that by the title of page, site name, and the URL. And if you don't know the author name, then you try to find the group name, and it's going to everything else is going to be the same except that you're just going to have the group name as opposed to the author. And if you don't know either the group or the author, then you would put the title of the page, and you're going to follow that with the retrieved month, date, and year. And you'll find that in the URL as well. And so here we have some examples. So one key thing about this slide is that we have parenthetical and we have narrative. And so the difference between the two is that if you're using a narrative citation, that means you're introducing the author or you mention the author in the sentence. But if it's parenthetical, then you're just going to be using the information, but not the author's name. So um, you'll follow the source or the information that you put, and you're going to have the author's name and then followed by the year. And so here we have our example. So for the book citation, we have the second guy, we have the title of the book, and then followed by the URL because this one had a URL. And then the journal article, see here we have the title of the title of the journal, I mean of the title of the source, and then we have the journal article after. So we have the Journal of Sports Economics. And then for the web page, this one we have the author's name. And so we're able to put slat B and warp C. And after that, we have the publish the year and the month, and then followed by the URL. And so for these are for 3 authors and more. So once again, how we see here, the only difference is that we're making sure that we separate the names. So we have the last name, the initial, and then we have comma, and the commas are separating each name. And so yeah, that's like the only difference between that, just to make sure we're separating the names as opposing to just one name. So for this one, we're gonna have an activity. So we're gonna give you guys a few minutes to spot the difference between these two sources and which one's MLA and which one's APA. So if you could just put the answers in the chat and we'll go over that in a few minutes. So Cynthia, you got it right. The first one is MLA and the second one's APA. So good job. So now we're going to go into Chicago style, and this is the 17th edition. So there's obviously a lot of different editions, but this is probably the most like recent edition that we have. So, and you would all want to check with your professor to see which style or which edition they're going to be using as well. So let's get into it. So a couple guidelines that we have here is just we said before, just to always check with your professor and look at the prompt that they have. But as far as that goes, so we're going to use standard fonts, of course, with 12-point Times New Roman. We're going to double space. We're going to have 1-inch margins, and then you're going to indent every new paragraph by 1/2 inch. You're also going to place the page number in the top right center, and you're going to include a title page, and you're going to use footnotes or endnotes. Now, what the title page, not all professors will request a title page, but some do, some don't. Just like I said, just look over the prompt. So yeah. And so for the title page, a couple guidelines that we have is the title is centered and it's a third down the page. And if you're going to be using a subtitle, you want to add a colon, and then you're going to place the subtitle after the colon. And then after that, you're going to place your name, course info, and date. And this is going to be several spaces below the subtitle. And so the difference on the title page is you're not going to include the page number. Like I said, once again, always check with your instructor. And here's an example that we have for the title page. So we have our title of our paper, and then we have the subtitle followed by a colon. And we see here that our title is centered and it's double spaced. It's bold. It's in bold, and it's also about like a third way down the page. And then we go follow that a couple spaces down, and we have this also centered in double space, but this one's going to be in plain text as opposed to being in bold, and it's going to be your first name and last name, class or course name, teacher's name, and then the date the paper's due. So citations. So the biggest difference between the 3 different formats that we've gone over is that Chicago uses citations. I'm sorry, Chicago uses footnotes, and that's how we use to do our in-text citations. So we have footnotes and endnotes. So most professors that I've come across usually have us use footnotes as opposed to endnotes, and that's going to appear at the bottom of the page after the source is being used. And then the difference between a footnote and an endnote is that the endnotes are going to appear all together at the end of the text instead of being on every separate page, and it's going to have its own endnotes page. And then we also have our bibliography, which is going to be the full citations, and that's going to be at the end of the paper. So footnotes, let's go over footnotes a little bit. So footnotes are just numbered notes. They help the reader reference the citation that you're using. And so the footnotes, they're numbered and it does not restart. So like once you have the first footnote, it's going to be 1, 2, 3. Even if you go onto a new page, it's still going to be 1, 2. It's going to follow on that numbering. It's not going to restart automatically. And you're going to include footnote anytime they use a source, anytime you're paraphrasing, summarizing, or if you're using a direct quote. And so the first footnote reference, it has to include the full note style. But if you use a source, then you could use the short note style. And full notes contain the full publication style as opposed to short notes that only contain the author's last name, the title page. And you shorten the title page if it's anything longer than 4 words, and then it's going to be followed by the page number. So the easiest way to insert footnotes is using the key shortcut. So it differs between Word and Docs and then MacBook. So for Word and Docs, it's the same. You're going to have Control, you're going to hit Alt and then F, and that will automatically pop up the footnotes. And then for MacBook, you're going to have Command Option in F, and that once again will automatically pop it up. But if you don't want to use that, you could go onto your software that you're using and you go to your reference tab, and you see here that it has insert notes on the side, and that's what you will just click on to pop that up. So the guidelines for footnote formatting. So there's different elements for a footnote entry depending on the source that you use. So for a book citation, we're going to have our author's first name and last name. And then you're going to have your source title, and your source title is going to be italicized. And then you're going to have your edition. But if the edition's, if it's the first edition or if it's not stated at all, then you'll just leave that blank. But if it's the second edition or revised edition, then you would put that, and it's going to be abbreviated. So you see here we have ED period and for the revised, we have REV period. And after that, we're going to have our publication information. So we're going to have our place of publication, a colon, and then the publisher, and then the year. And after that, we're going to have our page number and the URL if it's available. So the difference really between a book citation and a book chapter is that the chapter title is going to be enclosed in quotations, and you're going to have and then the book title is going to follow that. So instead of just having like a source title that we have here, we have a chapter title and a book title, and you're going to italicize the book title and you're enclosing quotations the chapter title. And then followed by that, instead of addition, you're going to have editor. And this is also abbreviated with ED, first name and last name, and then your publication information and page number. So here we have two examples of a book citation example, and we have a book chapter. So we have the first name here, it's Stephen Covey, and we have the source title, it's italicized, and then we have third edition. And then here we have parenthesized the publication information, and then we have the page numbers. And like I said, between the difference between the book chapter and the book citation is that following the name, we have the quotations and it's not italicized, and it's the chapter title. And then we have the book title. And now we're going to go into the elements of a journal article citation. So this one, you're going to have an author's name. Once again, it's going to be first name, last name. And then you're going to have your article title, which is going to be enclosed in quotations, and then followed by the journal name. And the journal name is going to be italicized, and it's going to have the volume number after. And then you're going to have an issue number and page number and DOI. Now, the difference here between a website citation and a journal article citation is instead of an article title, we have the page title. And then instead of a website title, we have a journal. Instead of a journal name, we have a website title. And then they're both not, this one, the website title is not italicized. And you're not going to be putting the page number on the website citation as well. And here we go. We have some examples. So we have the name, the article title and quotations, and then we have the journal name, and then followed by the issue number, and then page number and the URL. And this one, we don't have no page number, obviously, because it's from the website. The website here is Scribber, which is another source you could use for looking at different formats like MLA, APA. And we have the URL following that. So, yeah. And now we have the, oh, sorry, this is supposed to delete that slide. So now we have one second, I'm sorry. Now we have the elements of a short note citation. So now if you're going to reuse the source, you're going to have it's going to be just for the book citation, you're just going to have the author name, last name only, shortened book title, and it's going to be italicized, and then you're going to have the page number. So your example is going to be, we have the example here, it's Covey, 7 Habits, that's italicized, and then we have the page number. And then the chapter citation, instead of the book title, we're going to have the chapter title, and it's going to be quoted instead of italicized. So that's the difference between those two. And then for a journal article citation for the short note, we're going to have the author's name, last name only, the short article title quoted, and then we're not going to italicize that one. And then we're going to have the page number. And then the website citation is going to probably be the easiest one because all you need is the author's name and the shortened page title with quotations following that. So now we're going to go into formatting your bibliography page. So at the end of your paper, after you put your in-text citations, you're going to put, you're going to have a whole page of all your sources, and it's going to be the full entire information for the source. So you're going to have the heading is going to be bolded, and it's going to be centered at the top of the page. And you're not double spacing the bibliography page. It's just going to have a single line space between the entries. And the bibliography is indented using the hanging indent, and the author's names are inverted. So on the first, for the footnotes, it's the first name and then the last name, but this one, it's the last name first. And you alphabetize the sources by the author's last name. So for the guidelines for bibliography entries, so just like the footnotes, it's a little bit different for the entries for the bibliography. So for the book entry, you're going to have the author, the last name, first name, and then you're going to have your book title, and then a colon and a subtitle if it has one, and you're going to italicize. That, the edition, the place of publication, the publisher, and then the year. And here we have some examples, and notice how we have the hanging indent right here. And this one doesn't have a subtitle name, so we just italicized the title, the book title name. And then for the book chapter, the big difference here is that we're going to have a chapter title instead of the book title. And then following the chapter title, it's going to be a book title and a subtitle. And then you're going to have an editor instead of an edition. And the editor is going to be the first name, last name. And then you're going to have a page range instead of you're going to have the page range. And then after that, you're going to have the place of publication, and then you're going to have the year. So once again, you see here, we have our hanging indent. And then we have the chapter title. It's going to be quoted. And this one actually has a subtitle. So you see here, we have uh, the colon and then a subtitle. And they're all capitalized. They're capitalized. So, yep. And then for a journal article, it's kind of the same, a little, but it's also a little bit different. So we're going to have the author's name, once again, the last name, first name. And then we're going to have the article title in quotations, and then followed by the journal name, which is going to be italicized. And then you're going to have the volume, the number of the issue number, and the month, year, and then the page range, and then a DOI. So always just be sure that you have your hanging indents after for your entries, once again. And we have our article title right here. It's going to be quoted, and that's going to be the challenge of retaining customers acquired with free trials. And then the journal name is italicized. And then we have our issue number, and then the page range and URL. And so for the website, once again, that's probably going to be the easier one. So all you're going to need is the author's name if it's available, the page title, the website name, month, date, the year, and then the URL. So we have right here, the author's name is Caulfield Jack. And then the website title, or the page title, is going to be how to do thematic analysis, followed by the website name and the month, date, and year, and URL. So if you guys want to take a few minutes to identify the difference between these three different citations, which one's APA, MLA, and Chicago, and if you want to put it in the chat, we'll give you guys a few minutes to go over that. So if you guys just want, maybe you guys could just tell me what the first citation is. You guys take a guess about that, and just put it in the chat what you guys think the first one is. So Brandon said that the first one is Chicago, second one's APA, third one's MLA, but the second one's going to be Chicago because see, we have the hanging indent, and then the first one's going to be APA, and then the last one is MLA. So thank you for your participation. Yeah. Good job, Cynthia. So if you guys ever like want to go over any more information, we have a few resources that you guys could always look up, and they're very, very useful. I've used a few of these. Purdue OWL is a very good one. That one usually has like some kind of like generator for your citation, so you could usually just put your source and it'll help you generate it. Also, we have the MLA website and we have the APA and the Chicago website, and these are like the actual website, so you could go on there and you could find like more information, more detailed information, and then also it kind of stays updated with like the following, like the new versions. So if you ever need if there ever is like an 18th edition of Chicago, usually it'll probably be one of the first places to find that. And so also for additional reading and writing support, we have the Writing Center, which is located at the Fresno State Library. And then we also have our reading and writing tutors at Trio, and we also have guideline references that you guys could look at. And then the good thing about the Fresno State Library is they have format guideline handouts that you could just pick up and you could use them as a quick reference. So if whenever you're writing papers, you could have that like right next to you. So that's all we have to share today. So thank you guys for participating and thank you for joining us. So yeah, you want to take over, Brenda, or if you want to say anything, parting words.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us. We already got your attendance down. And for those who like username isn't their full name, just make sure you drop it in the chat. But yeah, we hope you guys learned a little bit more about MLA APA in Chicago, and we hope like this help you in the future for future assignments, and maybe you can always refer back to this as a resource. Great, thank you for coming.